In the quiet shadows of the antebellum South, whispers of scandal often hid behind the genteel facades of grand plantations. One estate in 1851, nestled deep in the Louisiana countryside, became the epicenter of a truth too dark for polite society to acknowledge. The plantation master, a man of wealth and unquestioned authority, carefully curated his family's public image while secretly orchestrating a series of acts so forbidden that even the closest neighbors dared not speak of them. Historical documents, rarely referenced and often dismissed as rumor, tell of a man whose obsession with bloodlines crossed the boundaries of morality and law. He maintained an iron grip over his wife and daughter, isolating them from the outside world, ensuring that no one could question or interrupt his control. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. The story begins with letters hidden in dusty drawers and diaries locked away for decades, revealing a disturbing pattern of manipulation, coercion, and secrecy. Scholars have uncovered traces of the master's obsession with lineage and the twisted pride he took in preserving it through his own family. Each carefully chosen marriage proposal, each whispered insistence on obedience, formed the scaffolding of a life built on dominance and dark desire. These accounts suggest that the plantation was not merely a home or a workplace, but a meticulously curated prison, where natural familial bonds were warped into instruments of power. Visitors to the estate might have noticed nothing unusual: polished furniture, neatly trimmed gardens, the faint strains of piano music echoing through the halls. But behind closed doors, an atmosphere of fear and submission prevailed. Servants spoke of strange orders, of whispered instructions delivered at odd hours, and of a household that seemed perpetually on edge, its members shadows of themselves. This was a world that blurred the line between familial devotion and exploitation, a place where love and cruelty became nearly indistinguishable. The repercussions of these dark deeds would ripple outward, touching the lives of those few who witnessed them, leaving a mark that would endure for generations. In a time when reputation dictated survival, few dared to confront the truth, leaving only fragmented evidence and hushed recollections for historians to piece together. What emerges is a tale that shocks, disturbs, and forces us to confront the hidden corners of history that society preferred to bury. The isolation of the family within the plantation walls created a psychological landscape as twisted as it was tragic. The daughter, growing up under the scrutinizing eyes of her father, learned early that obedience was survival. Each day blurred into the next, marked by rituals and expectations that no outside observer could understand. Letters preserved from the era hint at a mind increasingly fractured by the contradictions of love and fear. Her mother, a woman once vibrant and full of life, gradually became a shadow, her voice barely audible, her presence more ornamental than protective. Together, the two women existed in a fragile, suffocating balance, caught between societal roles and the hidden horrors of the estate. Accounts from former servants suggest that the plantation master's obsession extended beyond mere control. He recorded genealogical charts with meticulous care, noting not just births and deaths, but traits he considered desirable or undesirable. His journals speak of an unnatural fixation on heredity, revealing a man convinced that his family's bloodline must be preserved at all costs. Scholars who have studied these documents describe a chilling logic, an ideology in which manipulation, coercion, and secrecy were justified as acts of preservation. In this world, morality was subordinate to legacy, and legacy demanded silence. The house itself became a character in this drama. Rooms were dark, often shuttered against the outside world, corridors long and echoing, and portraits of forebears lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow every move. Some historians speculate that the constant presence of these ancestral images reinforced the master's obsession, reminding him of the lineage he sought to protect and control. Guests, if any were permitted, reported a strange tension, as if every creaking floorboard and shadowed corner carried a warning, and these details suggest a carefully orchestrated environment designed to isolate, intimidate, and manipulate, a psychological cage disguised as a home. Behind this veneer, the daughter's adolescence was marked by confusion and internalized fear. What should have been a time of growth and exploration became one of obedience and self-erasure. The mother, too, faced an impossible dilemma. To resist meant potential ruin. To comply meant complicity. In this closed system, trauma became inherited, a legacy as real and binding as the genealogical charts the master meticulously maintained. The plantation, in essence, was not merely a place of residence, but a crucible in which the human psyche was tested, strained, and often broken. The twisted dynamics of the plantation extended beyond the family to the few outsiders who glimpsed its secrets. Servants spoke in hushed tones of odd instructions, strict schedules, and punishments for the slightest deviation. Outsiders who visited sensed something was amiss, though none could articulate it fully. Letters from traders and neighbors occasionally mention peculiarities in the household, vague warnings couched in polite language, as if the truth was too dangerous to state outright. What emerges from these fragmented accounts is a picture of a household governed by fear, secrecy, and the unchecked will of a single man. The plantation master's obsession with control manifested in ritualized behaviors, meticulously recorded in his private journals. These entries, often cryptic and disturbing, detail inspections of the home, precise rules for personal conduct, and measures to ensure absolute compliance. His meticulous attention to lineage, who could speak to whom, who could marry, even how children were to be raised, was an obsession that consumed every waking hour. Historians examining these documents remark on the almost ceremonial nature of his record-keeping, suggesting a man who believed that order and legacy could only be maintained through surveillance and manipulation. Amidst this, the daughter grew more aware of her role within the twisted hierarchy. Her innocence, if it had ever existed, faded beneath the weight of expectation and fear. Scholars describe her as both a victim and an instrument, someone whose presence reinforced her father's dominance, while simultaneously embodying the human cost of his obsession. Her mother's influence, once a source of warmth and guidance, became increasingly symbolic, a fragile reminder of the life that might have been, had the master's compulsions not dictated every move. The house itself seemed to absorb these tensions. Darkened hallways echoed with the quiet despair of its inhabitants, creaking floors punctuated by the unseen movements of those who walked them. Objects once ordinary, chairs, tables, family portraits, became instruments in the psychological landscape, reminders of hierarchy, obedience, and control. For modern researchers, these material remnants offer clues into the daily reality of a family bound not just by blood, but by coercion, fear, and secrecy. It is in these small, often overlooked details, the way a door closes, the tilt of a portrait, the subtle shift in posture, that the full horror of the plantation emerges. Each act of control, no matter how seemingly mundane, contributes to a narrative of domination and abuse, leaving behind a legacy that would haunt those involved for decades. The plantation was a world carefully constructed, a place where morality, love, and fear were twisted into one indistinguishable fabric. The father's obsession with the bloodline did not stop at mere control. It shaped the very identity of his daughter. She was groomed to embody an ideal, a living extension of his will. Friends of the family, when they were allowed near the estate, remarked on her unnerving composure, a precociousness that seemed almost unnatural. Letters hint at a child taught to suppress fear and desire alike, to perform obedience as if it were second nature. Her every action, every word, was monitored, catalogued, and corrected if it fell short of the rigid standards set by her father. This relentless scrutiny carved deep psychological scars, shaping her perception of the world and the people in it. The mother, though physically present, became emotionally distant over time. Her spirit, once vibrant, had been worn down by years of enforced complicity and helpless observation. Historians speculate that she developed her own coping mechanisms: detachment, silence, and subtle gestures of resistance hidden beneath a facade of compliance. The triangular relationship between father, mother, and daughter created a climate of tension, where every glance and every word was loaded with unspoken meaning. Within this constrained and oppressive environment, the boundaries between familial love and domination blurred, leaving all involved psychologically entangled. Outside the estate, the community sensed something unnatural about the household. Rumors circulated, whispered in markets and churches, but no one dared to confront the master directly. Fear of social or even legal repercussions, combined with the man's intimidating reputation, ensured that silence prevailed. Over time, the plantation became a cautionary tale, a story half forgotten and half denied, leaving behind only fragments, letters, journals, and oral histories to hint at the darkness within. The physical setting of the plantation reinforced the psychological control. Large, imposing structures, darkened rooms, and the constant presence of ancestral portraits created an environment where every corner reminded the daughter of her role, and every shadow suggested surveillance. Even the natural landscape, dense forests, overgrown fields, and winding paths, contributed to a sense of isolation, a reminder that the family was both literally and figuratively cut off from the outside world. Through these combined forces of isolation, surveillance, and psychological manipulation, the daughter's identity became inseparable from the demands of the master. The mother's quiet endurance served as both witness and warning, a living testament to the destructive potential of unchecked power within a family. What appears on the surface as a wealthy southern estate hides beneath it a deeply disturbing narrative of coercion, obsession, and the inheritance of trauma. As the daughter entered her late teens, the father's obsession intensified, merging control with the sinister logic of preservation. Every interaction, every daily routine, was subject to scrutiny, leaving her little room to develop a sense of autonomy. Diaries recovered from the period indicate that the father measured her actions against an impossible standard, rewarding compliance with small privileges and punishing deviations in ways both subtle and psychologically devastating. It was a system designed to produce perfection, not in character, but in obedience, a reflection of the master's own ideals and anxieties. The mother, increasingly resigned, found herself powerless to protect her child. Yet she left traces of resistance in small, almost invisible acts, a note hidden in a drawer, a sympathetic gesture, or a fleeting moment of warmth. These moments, though brief, suggest that she understood the magnitude of the psychological imprisonment imposed on her daughter. Historians speculate that these hidden gestures may have provided the daughter with a fragile tether to humanity, preventing total internalization of her father's twisted worldview. The isolation of the estate, compounded by its strict hierarchical structure, also created a sense of perpetual surveillance. Even the landscape seemed complicit. The dense trees, overgrown gardens, and winding paths offered no escape, only the illusion of freedom. Letters from visitors describe an uncanny stillness in the surrounding countryside, as if the land itself reflected the psychological weight of the household within. Every creaking floorboard, every shadowed corridor reinforced the notion that no one could act freely, that every move was measured and judged. It is in this context that the daughter's development took on an almost ritualistic quality. Scholars describe her adolescence as a performance, one shaped entirely by external expectations rather than personal desire. The interplay between fear, love, and coerced loyalty created a psychological labyrinth from which there seemed no exit. The household became a microcosm of power and submission, where the father's obsession governed not just actions, but identity, leaving a lasting imprint on those ensnared within its walls. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? The story of this plantation is not just about individual cruelty. It is a cautionary tale of how isolation, obsession, and unchallenged authority can warp the human psyche and perpetuate trauma across generations. The plantation's dark legacy extended beyond its walls, leaving traces in the memories of those who dared to witness its inner workings. Former servants, traders, and distant relatives recalled moments that hinted at the depth of control the master wielded. A single glance, a word out of place, could elicit fear or even punishment. These fragmented accounts, often contradictory and vague, form a mosaic of oppression and secrecy, a testament to the lengths one man would go to preserve his vision of a perfect bloodline. The daughter, now older, became both the object and instrument of her father's obsession. Letters and diaries from this period suggest she understood, at some level, the mechanisms that governed her life. Every gesture, every glance was interpreted, catalogued, and sometimes punished. Yet beneath this calculated obedience, traces of rebellion occasionally surfaced, a fleeting look of defiance, a private thought recorded in a hidden journal. Historians emphasize the significance of these subtle acts, suggesting they reveal the resilience of a psyche under extreme pressure. Even in the most controlled environment, the human mind seeks avenues of resistance. The mother, meanwhile, had become a quiet observer of the psychological drama unfolding before her. Her role was paradoxical, both witness and participant, powerless to change the system, yet capable of providing small, almost imperceptible support. Scholars argue that her presence, though seemingly passive, shaped the daughter's understanding of loyalty, love, and survival. In a house governed by fear, even the smallest gestures could carry profound meaning. The physical spaces of the plantation mirrored its psychological landscape. Darkened rooms, shuttered windows, and imposing furniture conveyed authority and control, while ancestral portraits and relics of lineage reinforced the master's obsession with heredity. The natural environment, the dense woods, winding paths, and distant fields, amplified isolation, leaving inhabitants with the constant sense that the world beyond the estate was unreachable. Every element of the house and land contributed to a carefully orchestrated narrative of dominance and submission. The story of this household is not merely a cautionary tale. It is a study in human psychology, in the ways obsession can warp relationships and manipulate identity. It reminds us that history is often buried beneath layers of polite society, rumor, and selective memory. By examining these hidden accounts, we gain insight into the destructive potential of unchecked power and the resilience required to endure it. By the late 1850s, the full weight of the plantation master's obsession had left its mark on everyone within the estate. The daughter, molded and constrained by years of surveillance and coercion, had become a living testament to the destructive power of obsession and isolation. Her compliance was near flawless, yet historians note subtle traces of inner turmoil, a quiet dread, fleeting moments of hesitation, and private thoughts carefully concealed from the ever-watchful father. The mother, aged and worn, had become almost invisible, a silent witness to decades of control and fear. Their lives, intertwined in a web of power, secrecy, and inheritance, reflected a household governed not by love or morality, but by the relentless pursuit of a twisted ideal. The estate itself bore silent witness to these psychological horrors. Hallways that once echoed with laughter now seemed to amplify every creak and whisper. Rooms that had held family gatherings became arenas of fear and restraint, and the surrounding landscape, dense forests, desolate fields, and overgrown gardens, stood as both prison and protector of the family's darkest secrets. Even after the master's death, local legends persisted. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones of the house that seemed cursed, of shadows moving where no one should be, and of a family history too unsettling to recount openly. Historians analyzing this era emphasize that what makes this story particularly haunting is not just the cruelty of one man, but the subtle ways power can infiltrate and dominate human relationships. The daughter's experience illustrates how isolation, obsession, and the careful orchestration of fear can shape identity and destroy natural bonds. The mother's quiet endurance demonstrates the resilience required to survive under relentless control, while the estate itself stands as a reminder that environments can be constructed to reinforce psychological oppression. Ultimately, the story of this plantation is a dark reflection of human nature and the dangers of unchecked authority. It reminds us that history is filled with lives that went unseen, acts that were never publicly acknowledged, and truths that were deliberately obscured. By examining these buried narratives, we uncover lessons not just about the past, but about the enduring impact of trauma, secrecy, and the ways power can distort even the most intimate human connections. For those who explore these stories, there is a haunting realization. What seems like history is often much more. A tapestry of hidden suffering, resilience, and the human capacity for both cruelty and endurance. The plantation master's legacy lives on, not in wealth or status, but in the lingering shadows of memory and the stories that refuse to be forgotten.